Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and really grateful to have this time to practice together. Um, so I am a congregational rabbi in Atlanta, Georgia, where it is hot, just like everywhere else across the country. And I'm particularly attuned to the experience of being parched and in need of water right now. Personally, in my own life, I happen to be 8.5 months pregnant, so I'm very, very attuned to staying hydrated. But regardless of that, I think all of us are thinking about, okay, how do we both keep our bodies nourished and buoyant and full of life, and also how do we keep our souls spiritually refreshed, and how do we find wells of water, wells of resource, of compassion, when it seems like, in particular, that compassion and empathy are resources that are running very dry at this moment. So that has been on my mind. And I want to focus today's teaching and meditation on just the very simple but necessary practice of compassion and finding those wells of compassion in ourselves and for ourselves, so that we can be able to pour out for others as well, God willing. So just a little bit of teaching before we practice together. Um, Turns out there's a couple of convergences in the Jewish calendar at this moment. So this week in particular, we're reading Parshat Hukat, which is a moment of thirst, a moment of extreme thirst that the Israelites experienced in the desert. Recently, Miriam has died, and she was known for being the source of many of water for the Israelites. Wherever she would go, wells would spring up. But when she died, the wells all ran dry, and the Israelites were in crisis. And as you may know, they demanded water. They demanded to go back to Egypt, and Moses and Aaron are so overwhelmed that Moses strikes the rock, and water does come out, but it isn't in this easeful, flowing, abundant way. It's water that is related to constriction, and actually God calls this place the waters of Merivah, the waters of strife and contention. Um, and so this story just shows us how much, on a basic fundamental human level, we crave and need water and sources of life to sustain us. And if we don't have that, we're done. We're done. In parallel, I just learned today that today is the 3rd of Tammuz, the 3rd of the month of Tammuz on the Jewish calendar. And according to a rabbinic work called Seder Olam, um, the 3rd of Tammuz was the day that Joshua, when he was leading the Israelites into the land of Canaan, and they were about to battle one of the tribes there at the time, Joshua asked for the sun to stand still and remain in its place, so that they could have full sunlight, full power, and be victorious in battle. And it did. And that happened on the 3rd of Tammuz, says this ancient work, Seder Olam. And so you can almost feel like the blazing heat, and the parchedness of this time, converging from all directions, from the parsha and from the calendar. And then on a different level, on a less literal, but on a no less fundamental human level, I have felt, and probably many of you have felt, that after so many months of pain and war and struggle in the Jewish community and beyond the Jewish community, that so many wells of empathy and compassion have run dry. And perhaps each of us has felt that in a certain way for ourselves. We've seen it perhaps in our friends and our family, where there are just people that we do not have empathy for any longer that maybe we used to be able to tolerate. We have observed conflicts where there is just no toleration, no extending benefit of the doubt, and a lack of those kind of deep wells of compassion that maybe we used to have, but have just run dry. And I actually learned a phrase from the researcher Jamil Zaki, who was his piece re-aired on NPR yesterday, talking about empathy, talking about scientific studies of empathy. And he talked about a phenomenon of parochial empathy, where when a group experiences a profound tragic moment or profound loss, we do have empathy. We want to be able to pour empathy, but we have a limited quantity. We can only pour our empathy to our local in-group. And we feel like I can only go so far. I can only pour empathy to these people, but not to those people. And there's a zero-sum game. And the way I've often thought about our practice of mindfulness and our practices of compassion together is that ideally, when we are resourcing ourselves, when we are pouring back into ourselves first and giving ourselves the water, the nourishing, compassionate love and attention that we so crave in order to live, the more we can do that, the more there can be an overflow, first to our neighbors, and then to those people who we're close to, maybe in a familial sense or a peoplehood sense, but a little farther away. Maybe even to the people that it's harder to love. And God willing, if we practice, we can overflow to the whole world. And so I thought today we would just sit and practice for the next 15 minutes or so, with the basic, but always good metta practice, compassion practice that some of you have probably done before in different forms. And so I'll share with you how I do this practice, and then I'll guide you into meditation together. So this self-compassion practice usually consists of having a series of phrases, of compassionate phrases or blessings that you can offer to yourself. Start with yourself, although that can be hard in and of itself. But resourcing ourselves first. And I'll share with you the phrases that I like to use that work for me, but these are not fixed. So feel free to tweak the language or use your own phrases, whatever is most helpful and supportive for you. So the three phrases that I like to use in my own practice are, may I feel loved, may I feel safe, may I feel at peace. May I feel loved, may I feel safe, may I feel at peace. And I'll put those in the chat once we get started, so they can be there if you forget. And so what we'll do is just to yourself, after I guide us into grounding in our bodies, I'll just invite you to quietly whisper or in your head at your own pace, to repeat those phrases or your own phrases to yourself. And really, as much as possible, trying to intend those blessings for yourself. Really feeling the softness, the compassion. May I feel loved. May I feel safe. May I feel at peace. We'll do that for a few minutes, and then I'll guide us to you. If you want, you can stay with yourself and continue to wish those blessings to yourself the whole time, or I'll guide us in some concentric circles outward to a neighbor, a close person, maybe a farther person, and then to the wider world. So let's sit together. If you're not already, I want to invite you to take a gentle seat wherever you are, on your couch, your chair. You're welcome to feel yourself anchored, settled in the seat you're in, and allow yourself to assume a posture that feels relaxed and also dignified. You can have your eyes closed if you wish, or staring gently a few feet in front of you. Let your hands rest in your lap or clasped together. And just begin to find your breath. It can be the breath or another anchor in the body. Just noticing the body in this moment. Just paying attention to a place in the body that feels calm and at ease. Allowing the body and allowing your attention to help you settle and ground in this moment, right here, right now. So in your own time, you can begin to repeat these 3 phrases or your own phrases of blessing and compassion to yourself. May I feel loved. May I feel safe. May I feel at peace. May choose to synchronize the phrase on the in-breath and then soften your body, soften any places of tension on the out-breath. May I feel loved. May I feel safe. May I feel at peace. Take a few minutes here to continue to wish these blessings to yourself. When your mind wanders, no problem. Just take another breath and bring yourself back to the anchor of these phrases of compassion. So feel free to continue to intend these blessings, these phrases toward yourself if you would like, or if you want to shift the direction of focus, pick a person who you're close to who could use these blessings. It could be somebody you know personally, a family member, friend, a teacher, a neighbor, someone who it's relatively easy to wish these blessings toward. You can say, may you feel loved. May you feel safe. May you feel at peace. You can bring their face to mind if it helps you. But as you're saying the phrases, see if you can continue to cultivate these senses, both in the mind and the body. A felt sense of love and safety and peace, drawing from that limitless well. No need to get hung up on choosing the best person or the perfect person if you're stuck. Whoever first is in your mind, that is perfect. In these last few minutes, you have an option to stay with the person you're with or with yourself, wishing these blessings for yourself. Or if you so choose, you can stretch a little farther to wish these blessings of love and safety and peace to someone who's a little farther away from you. Maybe that means farther geographically, someone, maybe a stranger whom you don't even know, but you know could use these basic core human needs. Or maybe somebody who is close to you physically, but harder to wish blessings for. A coworker, a friend, a family member, a neighbor. Seeing if you can find that limitless well of compassion that comes from a well-resourced well. May you feel loved. May you feel safe. May you feel at peace. So in your own time, practice is never long enough, but in your own time, you can come back here to the Zoom room, the screen, to this group, and open your eyes. And before I hand it back to Josh, just want to invite you to, if you're not already on it, to turn to gallery view, just so you can see the faces of everyone who's here today on Zoom. And just looking at all of your beautiful faces to wish these blessings to one another. May you all feel loved. May you all feel safe. May you all feel at peace. And let's say it together, and we'll use we, and I really extend this to the whole world. May we all feel loved. May we all feel safe. May we all feel at peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. We'll have a chance to ask questions and offer reflections on our experience with that practice in just a moment. And I encourage you to stick around if you're interested and able. And in the meantime, we also have an opportunity now for those who are reciting Kaddish to do so. We'll put the text of the Mourner's Kaddish on the screen if you want to in the chat. Enter the names of anybody who you are holding in heart or mind today in memory as we say Kaddish together. And I'm just noticing, Natalie, if you want to try resharing the screen, it's coming up a little funny. There's like yeah, I don't think it's just my screen. I think there's something a little off about the text. And we'll try sharing it one more time. And then you're also welcome to unmute and join us. There we go. Thank you. Fantastic. So you're welcome to join us in reciting Kaddish together and unmute. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabba.
Amen.
B'chayei chol v'yimei chol v'chayei b'chol ve'Yisrael. Ba'agalam
Ba'agalam
v'zman
v'zman
karev
karev
imru
imru
amen.
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 Shmei
Yehi
Rabba
Shmei
Rabba
Rabba
V'Shem
Rabba
V'rach
Kol
Mevorach
Le'olam
Le'olam
Umaya.
Yisbarach
Yisbarach
Yishtabach V'Yitpa'ar
V'yitpa'ar
V'Yitramam
v'yitramam
V'Yitnaseh
v'yitnaseh
Yit'ar
V'yit'adar
V'Yit'ale
v'yit'aleh
V'Yit'halal
v'yit'halal
Shmei
Shmei
Yisrael
Dekudusha
Yehu
Rihu.
Elah
Le'ela
Mikol
Mikol
B'chata
B'chata
V'Shirata
V'Shirata
V'Shbechata
V'Shbachata
V'Nechamata
V'Nechamata
Ram Da'am
Ram Da'am Imru
Amen.
Yehi
Amen.
Shlomo
Shlama Rabba
Rabba
Mishmaya
Mishmaya
V'Chaim
Chaim Aleinu
Kol
V'Yakol
Yisrael
Yisrael
V'Yimru
V'Imru Amen
Amen.
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 Shalom
Shalom
B'Nai
Diramav
Yaseh
V'Yaseh
Shalom Aleinu
Kol
V'Yakol
Yisrael
Yisrael
V'Kol Yoshvei
V'Yakol
Tevel.
Yoshvei Tevel V'Imru Amen.
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 So thank you. And if you need to leave us, we offer you to come the shalom, farewell. Hope you can come back and join us again tomorrow, same time, same channel. So if you have a question, and Ron has already gotten in there, please label it as a question. All caps is really helpful for us, and we'll bring Lauren back up here as well. And Lauren, a meta practice is always, it's never, not really a bad time for it, and so I really appreciate you offering that today and grounding it in the image and the sensibility of water, right? And those waters of compassion and expansiveness. Rana asked a question here. I'm wondering about how our metta blessing becomes difficult because at the core of our being, we don't feel safe, loved, and at peace. We don't believe that the hammock, a reference to yesterday's set, will support us. We scramble to find shelter and fight with the other for safety, forgetting that God spreads the shelter of peace over all of us. Give you a chance to respond to that. Thank you, Rana, for
Yeah.
question, which is a comment. It's an observation.
What a beautiful and so relatable, heartbreaking observation, right? Like that sense of scarcity that I think is why we need this practice all the more. And for me, when I do this practice, when I remember to do this practice, it helps. That the subtle shift in the language was helpful for me. I couldn't say, may I be loved, may I be safe, because that I didn't feel like those were things I had control over, or certainly not for myself and not for others either. But for some reason, for me, the language of may I feel each of these attributes felt a little softer and a little more accessible. But
Mhm.
yeah, I just relate to the scarcity so much. And I don't know if, Rana, if you want to speak more to your own experience, if you're still here. I'm looking
Yeah,
for you on my screen.
yeah, yeah. I think this is a real, I think that distinction you're drawing between being and feeling, right? And it's very useful, right? It's like some things we can't control. Um, uh, and so what we have a bit more control over is certainly our response to whatever reality is, and a little bit of our discernment about what that reality is and how we label it. Right, and I think you're inviting us into that for sure. I'm wondering for folks here, how do you mind that gap, today? I think so many of us are feeling that. And I wonder, like, to me, Lauren, it's a wise insight that you're offering. So I wonder for folks hearing your own practice, how that gap between being and feeling is showing up for you, and if one of those lands better. Have you modified any of your own language, if you found that, in recent months? I wonder about that. Yeah. Oh, and the cat wants to be in on it. Here we go.
That's
Laura asked a question. Oh, a few questions coming in. All right, they're coming in fast and furious now. So Laura asked the question, would you offer a few more words about parochial empathy? and what each of us may do to address it in our own lives.
Yeah, so this is a new concept for me, and so I was just looking for the link to share with you. I just was listening to NPR yesterday, and it was an interview with this psychologist who I'll post. Here we go. So this episode, I'm going to put the link in the chat. Originally aired back in November, but was rebroadcast on my local NPR station yesterday. And the title was "Have We Lost Empathy Amid War in the Middle East?" And this psychologist, Jamil Zaki, who's at Stanford, is not an expert on the Middle East at all, but is an expert on empathy. And so I don't know if he coined this term parochial empathy, but the basic idea, if I understand correctly from listening to him speak, was that the basic question is why does empathy seem to us to be a finite resource when theoretically it seems like, well, we should be able to extend empathy to all human beings, at the very least to all children, who are innocent victims of war. Why is that, even that, sometimes so hard? And one of the reasons he said why it is so hard is it's not because of actually a lack of empathy, it's because we have an overabundance of empathy for our own in-group. And so all of our empathy is going toward the pain that our group is experiencing. And that creates a kind of zero sum. Well, if I give all my empathy here, then everyone else who's not there is against and not deserving of empathy. And just going back to your question. So I'll just direct you to Dr. Zaki's research and to listen to the little episode if you want to hear some more sort of how he thinks about practicing this specifically. But I think this metta practice is the sort of Jewish corollary that I find can help, because I think it does come so much from that place of scarcity, and we can't rationalize our way to know fundamentally that empathy is infinite. We have to really feel it first, and we can't just go straight for the person who's hardest to feel empathy for. We have to start with ourselves, and that's not selfish. That is just human.
There's a question that actually came up, and I think one is interesting. You just said that metta practice was a Jewish corollary to it.
No, yeah,
because it's actually a Buddhist practice. It is a Buddhist practice. There's
yes.
no, we give it its due. No question.
Yes, thank you.
And I think one of it's certainly been adapted by many cultures, and I think it's in many, one of the most basic Buddhist practices has really been exported to a lot of different places, and certainly has been adopted by other communities, and gladly, I think, by the Buddhists. They're not claiming any pride of authorship, or no copyright on metta practice. But just to answer that question that Sally had, I mean, yes, the basic motion is there. I would also say, though, that one of the best adaptations of this that I know of in terms of Jewish language is oh, why am I just blanking on it? Rabbi Amy Eilberg is one of the first that I heard teach it as the priestly blessing, which is 3 parts, right? And thinking of that, using that priestly blessing in a very similar way, which also asks for safety, which asks for similar sensibilities, peace. And so I'll dig up. We have a meditation that that Amy did on a podcast that Rabbi Jonathan Slater did with IJS about 4 years ago during the pandemic, and there's an episode with Amy on that, and we'll dig that up and put it in the chat. A lot of other good comments coming in here, and all these questions about empathy and what is empathy, how does empathy maybe intersect with ideas about loyalty or justice, right? I think those are kind of underneath some of this. So I want to highlight also Lori's question here, which is a slightly different one. How might you suggest we bring in a line in our practice that brings in the idea of me? I feel the full presence of the divine within me and around me, and within all living beings, and throughout my day, or something, or some such. Seems like it would be so connective, making it whole. I think it's a great idea. Sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is a good place to experiment with language for yourself to see, what phrase feels kind of like you could call it up at the tip of your tongue that would get at this, may I feel your presence. May I feel divine presence. May I be surrounded. Just kind of play with the language until you land on something that you're like, yes. And I think you'll know, kind of attend to how it resonates in your body. That's how I've come to these particular phrases for myself, is just trying things until I say like, oh, that's the one that gives me that sense of connection I'm craving.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think that's such a beautiful line to add. And there's no limit, I mean, I do three, I think, in line with what Amy does, kind of with the template of the priestly blessing kind of in the back of my mind, but there's no statute of limitation, just however many you can hold at a given time.
Mm. Yeah, some more great comments coming in here. Margaret, I love that you said that I always try to say the whole priestly blessing whenever I see someone from whom I shrink in some way or other. And when I'm done, it's myself living in another world. That's beautiful. Um, mm, yeah, and the other thing is, empathy as we're sort of getting at can, is a tall order. And I think it can be even just a question of obviously there are empathy without limits is an extremely tall order, and I'm not even sure it's a human order. Um, I think, and we don't have to go all the way there.
Right.
The other thing, right? Those are the maximalist cases. Most cases are not maximalist cases. They're, somewhere further within the bounds. And so, I wonder about, I've quoted it before here. I think that one of the teachers I really like is Gil Fronsdal, and I heard him talking once in a talk about, if you can't wish peace for somebody, or like having that full like love, if you can't fully like sort of feel a feeling of love towards someone, can you at least wish them goodwill?
Yeah.
Can you wish them well? And I think that can be helpful too.
Yeah. I think Hannah in the chat kind of is getting at how I'm approaching some of the more difficult cases, but right, thinking about what is that sort of core human root in a person that I can try to connect to, that doesn't involve, condoning horrific acts or condoning immoral behavior, but um, can can a blessing kind of heal whatever is at the root of that person's humanity and call them back to their own humanity, maybe. And metaphysically, is that possible? I want to believe that it is from afar, even.
Yeah, yeah. On my own podcast this morning, for this week's parsha, I did a little. I brought in from Star Wars that this hitting the rock is sort of Moshe's Darth Vader moment,
Mm,
and we had some fun with the sound effects. Um, so if you're into
nice
that, you
optimism.
can listen. But but I think that you know, there there's a moment here of this flash of anger, right? That we see it as bookends actually in Moses' life. That his book that at the beginning of his life, Vayach et HaMitzri, that he strikes the Egyptian, and here Vayach et HaSelah, he strikes the Egyptian, and the first is like, exiles him from Egypt, and the second one keeps him out of the promised land. And so there's something about, this moment of giving into the anger, right? That is, human. I mean, this is our greatest leader, and the Torah portrays him as, fully human.
Mhm.
And at the same time, right, is not in some way is less than ideal, right? That's really fascinating. Lauren, thank you so much for this exploration, for this practice, for this Torah today. Thanks to everyone for your comments and your questions, really rich discussion in the chat. Thank you. And yeah, always a great conversation here. We will be back. Mark will be back tomorrow hosting, and we'll look forward to seeing you when you can join us. And in the meantime,